Welcome to this week's Beyond Bitcoin Hangout. These hangouts are brought to you by the Beyond Bitcoin crew. We encourage everyone to freely share these recordings and to help spread the knowledge and benefits of our DPost 2.0 blockchain technology that we all call BitShares. While listening to this recording, please feel free to visit our website, beyondbitcoin.org, and be sure to stay tuned in for some additional information at the end of the recording. As always, we would like to say thank you, and we appreciate your support. So please continue to vote for our delegate or worker contract so we may continue providing these valuable services to our community members. So once again, welcome, and please enjoy this week's Hangout.
Welcome everybody to another Beyond Bitcoin Hangout. Today is October 9th, 2015. We are joined by Bytemaster of Cryptonomex, who is working on BitShares 2.0, aka Graphene, the week before the projected launch of BitShares 2.0, aka Graphene. We come together as a community every week to ask Bytemaster questions and get answers and provide insights on to the questions that he might bring our community. And we also have Bytemaster starting these hangouts out by giving us a community update. So with that said, Bytemaster, would you like to get started with the updates?
All right. So it's been another busy week, very successful week from a testing and development point of view. So I'll give you a brief update on the testnet. Last Friday, we launched the latest testnet, and it has run continuously from then till now, and has survived flooding. Several testers on the forum flooded the network the best they could, and everything seemed to work fine. No nodes dropped off, or if they did drop off, they came right back all on their own. The network has proven to be very resilient, sustaining for over half an hour to an hour, about 100 transactions per second, which is plenty to launch with. The 100 transactions per second is the result of artificial rate limiting that we put into place at the start of this new test network. Because last week we proved that we could do 1,000 or more transactions per second in short bursts. There's no reason to do 1,000 transactions per second. If that kind of thing's happening, it's probably an attack at this point in time. We will upgrade the network infrastructure as the user base grows and demand for transactions increases. So that's where we are there. We did find a number of issues with the network this week, and we have resolved them. So I'm feeling confident for the launch next Tuesday. So that is still on schedule, and we're going to go ahead with it, unless, of course, something catastrophic is discovered that would put people's funds at risk. I guess that's all I have on it. So if there are any questions at this point in time, let me know.
I've got a couple of them here. You mentioned that there were some network issues. Can you talk a little bit about them, speak to them a little bit, and maybe help some of the newbies understand what's going on?
Sure. Some of the things we discovered this week were a result of testing, and they were very, very subtle issues. There was some non-deterministic behavior in how we would iterate over accounts because we were using a hash lookup table that wasn't deterministic. We switched that to use ordered indexes everywhere rather than hashed indexes. It's a little bit slower, but it's deterministic. In the future, we can switch back to hash indexes if we need something that is faster, and we can verify that we can do so in a deterministic manner. The main thing that caused some nodes to get out of sync, because depending on the order in which they started and stopped their client, it would affect the order of that IDs were allocated. Fortunately, we were able to switch to an ordered index, and the default network did do everything in the proper order. So we didn't even have to hard fork or work around that. But that was a very subtle bug that just required testing. And I feel very good. Every time we find a bug like that, it gives me confidence that we've done sufficient testing. some people say you don't find if you don't find bugs, then then that's good. But I think finding bugs and fixing them is a better sign of the amount of testing that's happening, that you're doing sufficient testing. If we never found any bugs, then I'd be worried that, well, maybe we just aren't testing this thing right, or we aren't looking in the right places. So that was one. We fixed a few other cases where we were referencing memory that had been deleted, things like that. Technical details. But none of the things we found were severe enough to affect the test network and that we couldn't recover from. So we've applied all those fixes, and we're very, very pleased with the result.
Would you say that it's fair? I think it's important to bring this into perspective. I'm not somebody who's worked on vast code projects or anything, but from the little bit of experience that I have had in school and stuff, can you say that there's ever been a time, in all honesty, that you've had projects that haven't had unforeseen bugs or little things that need tweaked, fixed?
Bugs are kind of like, they have an exponential decay in the time between bugs. When we launched BitShares 1, we had a whole lot up front, and then as time progressed, it was farther and farther and farther between finding new bugs. And so in the case of Bitcoin, they haven't had any major bugs in over a year, but there was always going to be something somewhere. And we could wait until we don't find any bugs for a really long time. It's kind of like floods. Sometimes you find them, sometimes you don't. I guess what I'm trying to say with all this is that bugs are to be expected, and we will continue to resolve the bugs and apply the fixes as necessary. The users of the system, no one likes bugs. Everyone wants a bug-free system. And the only way that you get systems that approach bug-free level is to have massive amounts of testing in every foreseeable use case. And the combinations and permutations of user actions are too much to enumerate and validate in advance. It's just intractable. So all you have to do is test, repeat, and fix as you go, and it'll get more and more stable. But somewhere along the line, you have to ship. You have to make the decision that this is good enough, and if something comes up, fix it. And so right now, we're at the point where major bugs have all been found, and the things we're fixing now are the polish, the little loose ends that come up that all of our other testing didn't catch because things normally work. It's the corner cases that we're tracking down. So you'll see things like maybe there's a rounding error, or maybe there's an overflow somewhere. We think we've got them all. We think we've tried to code defensively to make sure that there aren't overflows. This whole blockchain system is all about asserting your inputs and your outputs and making sure that all your preconditions and post-conditions are met. and we think we've done a really good job of that in graphene. I have an order of magnitude more confidence in graphene today than I did when we launched BitShares 1. So I also feel that the code base today is better than the existing BitShares code base in terms of quality and being bug-free. So we're going to go ahead and launch. We're going to continue to refine things. We just want to make sure that everyone is prepared. Everyone knows that your funds are going to be safe. If you retain your private keys, nothing's going to happen to your funds. And any bugs that do come up can be fixed and worked around. It's very, very unlikely that there will be a bug that impacts your account balance. So
just because of the nature of the way the blockchain works, basically, is what you're saying.
Right.
Can you explain a little bit what the difference is between the types of bugs that would require a hard fork versus which parts of the code, if there's a bug found, would just require all the witnesses to update something and the network would continue without a hard fork?
Sure. It's really easy to describe the type of bugs that don't require a hard fork. Anything in the user interface does not require a hard fork to fix. And that's where the vast majority of issues are right now. When it comes to hard forks, if it changes the behavior of something the witnesses did in the past, that is certainly a hard fork. If it changes the validity of future transactions, that could cause a hard fork. Now, a hard fork, there's all kinds of different definitions of forks and different types of forking here. But at the heart, a fork is a change in the interpretation of the history of events. And there are some changes that would restrict things. So things that were possible in the past are no longer possible. That is the type that causes us to have special conditions where we have to support the old code and the new code simultaneously in order to continue to sync the chain. You have to preserve old behavior, and that's probably the most difficult type of hard fork. So if we found some issue where there's some non-deterministic behavior, we would have to define that non-deterministic behavior as the expected behavior in order to fix it. That's probably the most annoying type of hard fork. Another type of hard fork is where we're going to allow something in the future that we didn't allow in the past, which is basically reducing restrictions. That is an easier thing to implement. And the only thing it requires is all witnesses to upgrade to the new rules before that change in the rules takes effect. And as long as that happens, the network is not at risk. And then there's a third type of fork, and this is the unplanned fork. This is where we have all the witnesses are running the exact same code, but the behavior of the code is not deterministic. It does not do the same thing on all machines, and therefore some witnesses go one way and some go another way, and eventually it means that some transaction is allowed that shouldn't be allowed for some, that's valid for some witnesses but not for others, and then the chain splits. So those are the different types of forks that we can have. The most dangerous type is the unplanned for ones. The next most annoying one is it's deterministic, but everyone's in sync, and they did the same thing in a way that we didn't want. And the best type is a feature upgrade one where we're adding new things and it's planned. So recognizing that the unplanned bug-oriented forks can happen, and anyone who says that they can't is lying. Bitcoin had one in 2013 with the block size. They did something that wasn't supposed to change or cause it, but it happened anyway. So it doesn't matter how careful you are, even the Bitcoin developers can have these types of situations. So the question is, what do we do if it happens? What is the consequence to the users of the system? And can it be detected? In the case of Bitcoin, it was, I think it was a couple hours, and it required all the mining pools to downgrade and switch and then produce another longer blockchain and migrate transactions. And I believe a few people managed to get a double spend off during that period of time.
I did not know about that.
I could be wrong, but something in the back of my mind remembers hearing something about that. So I can't cite it, but there was that disruption. There were two chains, and anyone who wasn't aware that the blockchain had forked because they weren't paying close attention could have been double spent against. In the case of BitShares, we have a much, much stronger guarantee that we've programmed in, and this is the last irreversible block. We have the last irreversible block, which is the last block that was signed or confirmed by 2/3 of all witnesses. This block can never be reversed by any fork or any bug or any issue ever. It's guaranteed. And generally speaking, if you have 30 witnesses, 2/3 is going to be 20 blocks, 3 seconds. times 20 is 1 minute. So 1 minute after your transaction comes through, you will have an irreversible confirmation. And we display that in the user interface that your transaction is technically pending. This is sort of like Bitcoin waiting for an hour to know, 6 blocks in Bitcoin before you know that it's confirmed. In reality, you can accept it as 99.999% confirmed after just 3 seconds. But if you're an exchange or you're going to take some irreversible action as a result of something that happened on the blockchain, such as transferring another cryptocurrency or something like that, you should wait until it's irreversible. What this means is that if the network encounters some unforeseen, unexpected problem in the future, and all the witnesses go down in a fiery death, we have this last irreversible block, and you're guaranteed safe for there because everyone will be able to find that block and then build off of it.
This is one of the basic problems that Gox had, right?
Well, every blockchain has this problem in the sense that if you have a major network disruption that causes the blockchain to splinter, not just into 2 forks, but into 30 forks, all the witnesses lose communication and they start producing on their own, or something like that, it gets very difficult to figure out how to join them back together. And in Bitcoin, the proof of work ends up eventually getting it consistent. But you don't know how long it's going to be, and there's always the possibility that something else will come along and provide a better alternative. But with these last irreversible blocks, we can prove that all the witnesses had consensus at a certain point in time, and therefore, even if they lost communication, they'd start back up, and they'd at the very least have to build off of that one because they couldn't build off of any other block without intentionally being fraudulent. And no one else who had the blockchain on their computer would recognize it. It's sort of like having a checkpoint.
That's what I was thinking.
Yes. So the last irreversible block is what protects everyone on the network from any unforeseen issues. And as long as you wait that long for your confirmation, you're good, regardless of what happens on the network with reorganizations. So I just wanted to throw that out there as what's ultimately protecting you. I realize that what I'm saying here is not necessarily, I spent a lot of time talking about the potential for bugs that could happen and things like that. I really want people to, I'm not saying that because I think it's the code's buggy or anything like that. It's just there's so many things that are unforeseeable, and I want to make sure that we're pleasantly surprised and that no one's expecting perfection on launch. So I'm trying to underplay things a little bit here rather than have us go forward and be overconfident. The test networks have been very, very helpful. They've been very stable. So once the real network comes out, it's going to have none of the flooding on it that we've been doing on the test network. So it's going to be operating at a much, much more conservative level than we've been testing at, which should be a very good thing.
Sure. There's just a couple things here questions that have been asked by the community during the course of this discussion. The one that I think fits into this specific point would be there was a minor fork with 35% of the witnesses last night. Do you foresee this being resolved by the next hard fork? That's by Clay Up.
I haven't looked into what caused that fork last night. I don't necessarily know whether his night is the same as my night. So we'll have to review that. We had a fork where a third of the witnesses went offline because we lost our internet connection, but it automatically recovered. We issued a patch yesterday to resolve some of the forking behavior. And if it's the fork that was caused by the patch that we already have, it's possible that we've already fixed it. But I'll have to investigate it to figure out what's going on there. The main thing is this. if there is a fork like that does happen, it's just a matter of those witnesses being diligent to resync to the main chain and get back in sync with the consensus. So the witnesses early on will have to be a little bit active to keep up with confirming the ledger if there is something that doesn't work. But most users won't have to deal with that. Most users will be using light wallets, talking to servers that are maintained by people who are being diligent and making sure they stay on the fork. And worst case scenario, you might have a little bit of downtime while your service provider resyncs to the network. I don't suspect that we'll have these problems for very long. These are the type of things that we identify and we fix, and it just gets better.
I feel like first off, this is a good place to plug this because there is this test net that's running, and I don't know, but I'd assume that any time that somebody's listening to this, there's the potential for a new user who might be interested in joining the test net. Do you have a particular way that you would say would be best to get in on this action that you guys are playing around with behind the scenes, BTS 2.0?
Use graphene.bitshares.org is our test wallet. You can go there, sign up, create an account. You'll end up with 1,000 core. Core is the asset on the test network that's equal to BitShares. Go ahead and get on there and start trying to do things. Granted, you'll be using the user interface, and that's where most of the bugs are. But it's people doing things like that are finding things. If you're, claim your balance and make sure that you can import your balance. If you had it in your BitShares wallet on October 5th, you should be able to see it in the test network. So please do that. One of the things we will be doing is publishing the Genesis block or the Genesis state on October 13th, shortly after we take it, and then we're going to update it. So please review that file to make sure that it contains what you think. You'll have a couple hours to review it while we're preparing to do things. So we'll have a thread on the forum that tells you what to look for to verify that your account's there, and if you're supposed to get a free lifetime membership, that you've got it, and things like that.
Can you publish the code from which you derive the Genesis block also?
It's already published as part of BitShares 093C.
What would the command be to push or create Genesis block from that?
I don't remember it off the top of my head, but okay. If you look at the commit history for BitShares 9.3C, you should see that there were several new RPC commands added, one to export your keys and the other is to export blockchain state or something like that. So it's relatively simple. Anyone can generate a Genesis file, but there are some aspects to it that are not automatically generated. And those are things like setting the initial fees and setting the initial witnesses, as well as certain accounts that get free upgrades. So we'll be doing some manual tweaking to the automatically generated Genesis file. On that note, no pun intended, notes will not be migrated to BitShares 2.0. Notes are going to be having a snapshot on the same date, and they will be getting their own blockchain based off of the snapshot. So you can view it as taking the Genesis block and splitting it in half. All the notes balances are going to go off on their own blockchain, and they will no longer be those assets on the BitShares chain.
Are you removing the test node assets too?
Yes, I'll be removing the test node assets too, just to reduce the bloat, and because the issuer has given us permission to do so.
But Muse is going to be based on graphene still. Is that correct?
That is correct, but it's going to be its own blockchain to be launched in a couple weeks. but we're taking a snapshot now. So notes will be illiquid between October 13th and the launch of the Muse blockchain.
Okay, we're getting a flood of questions, Bytemaster. So do you mind if I real quick try to get a few of these knocked off? One of them is from Fox. He says, Dan, what value do you see in subjecting the code base to review by a third-party reviewer? Is this a valuable worker proposal at some point?
The more eyes on the code, the better. So there is tremendous value to it. As far as a worker proposal, that's up for every individual to determine. I think at this point in time, there's probably other things that are higher priority than that. But then again, I trust myself completely. So I'm not looking for any trust-related issues with the code. So it would only be testing. And by being open source, anyone can test at any time. And the best test, of course, is users using it. So, but having third parties look at it is always good, and I welcome it.
Okay, one more question by him. When do you anticipate the feature of transaction ordering being separated from the block signing responsibilities of a witness node? And is that a hard fork, along the lines of kind of a few minutes ago you were talking about?
Could you repeat the first part of that?
The front end, yeah. When do you anticipate the feature of transaction ordering being separated from the block signing responsibilities of a witness node? Is that a hard fork?
Not necessarily. If witnesses voluntarily agree to allow someone else to define the order for them, then it could be separated.
So it's not necessarily something that needs to be done, though. What would be the benefits, and are there any benefits to doing it that way as opposed to the negative consequences that might occur?
Yeah, so right now witnesses have the complete authority over the order in which transactions are included in a block. There are several different options here. One is to define all transactions must be included in a particular order defined by the hash of the transaction, or defined by their expiration date, or something along those lines. If you increase that constraint, you make it, you allow the people who produce the transaction to have a little bit more control, and they can start gaming the system. If they want their transaction to be included first to beat all the other orders to the market, they might mine their transaction ID. If they, or if you do it based on expiration date, they might create a transaction that expires very soon so that it try to beat things. But of course, you only have second resolution, and so you have to resolve ties and things like that. I can see some value in having a deterministic ordering of transaction. It removes the ability of witnesses to manipulate, but witnesses always have the option to include or not include a transaction. So they might not be able to reorder transactions within a block, but they would still ultimately retain control over the order of transactions between blocks. Which block do they actually go into? All that said, the more restrictions and requirements you put on things, the more expensive validation becomes, because you've got to make sure those constraints are met. It reduces the ability of witnesses to do their own optimizations later. In some cases, witnesses just want to do first come, first serve, which is what is currently implemented. And that has a lot of benefit as long as you trust the witnesses. It means that things happen in the order in which the witness found out about them, in which case, in some sense, if you have an honest witness, is the most honest way to process orders. So I guess that's a very long answer where I went over the pros and cons of doing it both ways. I don't know which way is best. I'm inclined to allow the witnesses to have complete freedom over the order of the transactions. But that would be a good debate for the community to have.
That's one of the things that is the most interesting to me, is the debates that we're going to inevitably have as this stuff progresses.
So let me talk a little bit about OpenLedger. OpenLedger is going to be just like the graphene.bitshares.org wallet. It's just going to be hosted by OpenLedger, and it might be themed a little bit differently, and will promote different assets and integrate different deposit withdrawal features.
Out of curiosity, does this connect up with Ken Code's questions regarding accepting the wallet QR codes?
What about QR codes?
I'm just wondering if OpenLedger has any of that stuff, or if here's the question that Ken Code's asking: to pay at a store via BitShares point of sale, which is awesome, and I'm sorry, Ken Code, that I hadn't got to this before. Wallet QR codes are required. Will the new light wallets above support sending and receiving smart coins via QR codes?
Not on day one, but I agree that's a great feature.
Yeah. I thought that you kind of knew what Ken was talking about. And okay, so never mind.
How many different companies or organizations, and maybe if you can't disclose who they are, just a number of how many has Cryptonomex licensed to run the backend infrastructure of the hosted wallet from day one, besides CCDK?
Honestly, I'm not aware of all the people that Stan has been talking to with that regard. We kind of have division of responsibilities here. I believe it's probably a half dozen that I can think of off the top of my head. I know that more have contacted us expressing interest, but at least a half dozen.
So real quick to clarify my understanding of the lightweight wallet, then will that create sort of robustness in your ability? If you're running the lightweight client, you can then tell it to query all of those different nodes to have a robustness in the making sure that you're getting the correct information from the blockchain.
Currently, the lightweight only connects to one at a time. In the future, we could have it connect to more than one and verify that they are getting the same data. So one of the things that we've added this week in the Light Wallet is the ability to change the server that your Light Wallet is talking to, which means that if OpenLedger goes down for some reason and you want to do something, you can point it at Banks or Bunker and have them do it. Or if you want to run your own full node in the cloud, then you can have your Light Wallet talk to your cloud-hosted full node. And I think that there's probably a lot of value to people to just have their own full node in the cloud that they don't have to worry about. They can access that from their phone or from whatever other device they want to use.
I have another question regarding the Genesis block. How much time would it need to have the accounts in the Genesis block sorted as they are sorted in BitShares 1? I'm talking in particular about the Quixote accounts, because they kind of have been the first all day long, and now it seems you have sorted the account names alphabetically, which looks bad if you have all these scatter A whatever accounts in the beginning having very low ID numbers.
Getting those to be in the same order is probably several hours worth of work in the old BitShares code base. So technically, it's possible. At this point, I don't think we have the time to do that. What we can do is go through the list of accounts that are Quixote founders and manually move them to the front, because we're going to have to do some other manual edits to the one that's dumped from BitShares 1 to add the referral, lifetime memberships, and the Quixote founders. So we've got a list of Quixote founders. We will we can move them manually to the front. They might not be in the exact same order, but they should be near the front.
That would be awesome. And I have another question in regards to the feed frequency or feed publishing frequency. From my understanding of the new BitAsset system, is it really that important to publish that many feeds, like every 20 minutes? We had it in BitShares 1. Would it not be enough to have one price feed every hour?
It depends on how fast the market's moving. Technically, you don't need to publish that frequently, but if you publish only once an hour and the price changed by 10% in the last hour, there might be some shorts out there that will be really upset if they were force settled at a price that was off by 10% because the feed didn't update in a timely manner. So I would say that to give the best quality, fairest deal to people and to minimize the risk to the shorts and therefore minimize the spread and the premium, that the price feeds should be published anytime they change by more than a fraction of a percent.
Okay. And yet another question about the fee pool. I still don't understand really how the fee pool for market-backed assets are going to work long term. Who would spend USD to fill the fee pool?
The fee pool is set up so that any fees paid in USD go to the issue, or just general, let's talk about fee pools. A fee pool is a set of BTS that's available for paying fees. And it's kind of like a special market order. The issuer of the asset says, I will buy back my asset and give you core at what is known as the core exchange rate for the asset. Core is BTS exchange rate for the asset. So if you're going to pay a transaction fee in USD, you need to convert the USD to core, and the network will automatically do that for you at the core exchange rate. The issuer gets the USD, and the network gets core from the fee pool to pay the referrers and the network fees. It's up to the issuer of the asset to keep the fee pool funded and to set the core exchange rate or the BTS exchange rate. When I say core, think BTS because BTS is the core asset, foundational asset of the network. That's where that comes from. So when it comes to bit assets are the issuer is the committee account, and the committee account has the ability to access and spend all of the fees that are paid in BitUSD, which means they have the ability to sell the BitUSD they collect for BTS and put it into the fee pool. So currently, that's what would happen. The committee members would create a market order to sell the USD that they've collected, get core back for it, put it back in the fee pool. Of course, anyone at any time can donate to the fee pool if the issuer is not keeping it funded.
Okay, so for the core exchange rate, it would make sense to have it a little higher, like have a 5% premium for the core exchange rate compared to the borrow exchange rate, would it?
Yes, compared to the settlement price, having a premium for paying your transaction fees with USD makes sense so that you can cover all the costs associated with the market operations and the risk and the changing of the price of things. So yes, you can have some premium there. It's not necessary, but it does help. If BTS is rising, then no premium is necessary at all. They pay the fee, you get the core goes up. I guess if it's falling, the network's long USD. So if BitShares is falling, then the network makes money from the fees it's collected until it refunds the pool.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, Riverhead asked a question a while back that I didn't get a chance to get to, but I wanted to bring up. Was there any luck working with exchanges with regard to preventing dumping of BTS and note pair. So I guess maybe not use the word dumping. I think he's asking, and maybe you can tell me if I'm wrong, Riverhead, about the BTS and note pairing being taken off completely off of these exchanges.
If you have notes on a centralized exchange, you should withdraw them immediately to the network. If you have notes on the BitShares network, then they'll be migrated and it'll be just fine. Any notes you buy on an exchange after the 13th may or may not be honored in the final end of the day. And that's ultimately up for the music folks to coordinate with the exchanges. I have not done anything with that.
Sure. But you haven't heard any whispers in the wind.
Yeah. All it takes is one person sending them an email, and I'm sure they'd shut down trading until they've determined whether or not they're going to support the final Muse blockchain.
Going back to Xerox's question about the core. All right, very good. The reason for the core terminology is that simply because graphene can be used for different blockchains, and they all have a different term, different symbol for their primary core asset, and so you're using a generic term until whatever asset rolls out for that particular chain?
Correct. It's just our way of thinking about the asset without getting in the mindset of any particular product.
Okay, thank you.
Brendel Swan is mentioning something about your blog post, your latest blog post. Brendel, are you there?
Yeah, I'm here.
Can you expound upon what you're asking here?
Yeah, I'm asking about the negative mining attack on Bitcoin being 100 times less secure. It seems like it's the death knell for Bitcoin, and I'm just wondering if we're staying mum about it a little bit until the lifeboat of BitShares 2 is ready for all the Bitcoiners that we love and appreciate. We wanted the lifeboats to be a little tested before we really bring it up.
The negative mining attack and all that, at the end of the day, it comes down to the Bitcoin is secured by the profit margins of the miners. If they've got really wide margins, they've got a lot of security because you have to pay the margin is what it has to do, is the cost of the attack. So what I was really trying to get at with that article is it doesn't change how Bitcoin works. It doesn't change that Bitcoin has a consensus model and that there are major actors that control most of the hash power. And the mining pool operators and large mining pools, they're going to continue to do their thing. And it's going to be as secure as BitShares with a couple of witnesses, right? If we had 6 or 7 witnesses, all right, Bitcoin's going to continue on that front. It just means that if someone wanted to, they could come in and buy it out. And the cost of buying control of Bitcoin from the people who currently control it is directly proportional to the value of the network after you buy it and the profit margins that the people who are currently operating it are seeing. If you give someone an option to walk away from their job for 3 years salary up front, most people are going to take it and then go do something else with the money. So I don't think it's going to have a death knell effect on Bitcoin. The cult of Bitcoin very much believes in proof of work, and they believe what they believe without any rationality to it. And anyone who has been applying the reason, who realizes that proof of work's flawed, they've already switched to other projects like Ripple or Next, Peercoin, or BitShares. So anything that we can say to debunk proof of work at this point is just, it's not going to convert the true believers. I do think that publishing things like that creates an opportunity. It creates an opportunity for someone who wants to upgrade Bitcoin to buy it out and do something really interesting with it. And the buyout cost is nowhere near as high as people think it is. So that means that there are more potential business opportunities with buying out Bitcoin than previously thought.
Can I interrupt real quick on that? Because you said you're mentioning numbers here on how much it would cost, but I don't remember reading you posting how much you think it would have cost. Maybe I'm wrong in the blog. Do you have the numbers like in your head, like if you figured it out, like general area?
Well, in a system, I said is 100 times cheaper to attack, which basically means that I think it will cost 100 times less than people think. And people normally think that costs 25 Bitcoin times $250 every 10 minutes is the cost to buy Bitcoin. But it's only the margin. I made an assumption in all my calculations that mining profitability is 5%. But that was an assumption, and as assumption stated right up front, I have no idea what the actual profitability is of miners. I don't know what percentage goes to electricity versus what percentage is in their specialized hardware, and the long-term equations of expected difficulty rises, increasing competitions, market volatility. All those factors impact the profitability of miners, and every miner actually has a different number. I do know that their profitability, I know that their revenue is going to be cut in half unless Bitcoin doubles. And if you cut revenue in half, you're going to really hurt their margins within the next year. So, well,
I just ran the numbers here, and at the rate that you were saying, that's $900,000 a day. I don't know how long that needs to be sustained, but
so the numbers I was talking about for attack were $5,000 a day, and possibly less. So, but there's several different factors here, and that is one: at what price will the current Bitcoin overlords be willing to sell out? They might not be willing to sell for just a multiple of their margins. They have some multiplier. Any business, they've got their revenue, they've got their profit margins, and then they got their sale price. And there's usually some multiplier on that. I don't know what that multiplier is.
Makes sense.
There's different players involved, and they've got different long-term goals for their business, and they've got different alternative revenue streams, right? People might be Bitcoin miners today. They don't care about the mining profits. They care about the future profits they're going to earn by being in control of the network. And so what's the value of being in control of the network? And that's a big question mark. In some sense, the Bitcoin network could already have been attacked and is now in the hands of people who have other plans for the network, and we won't know. Right? An attack on the Bitcoin network won't necessarily be obvious. It will be like a silent coup of a democracy, right? We got a shadow government running the show now, but everyone still thinks it's a democracy.
The puppets still come out and wave their hands.
Exactly. Someone taking over Bitcoin will probably do it that way, and Bitcoin will gradually evolve in the direction that those people want to take it, and they have some for-profit motive. And I'm not saying for-profit's bad. I'm saying it's very good. But what I am saying is that it shows the ludicrousy of proof of work from an efficiency point of view. You want to pay people high margins because that raises the cost of their defection. And I know that margins decrease as market competition increases. And as a whole, the entire economy, doesn't matter which industry you go in, they all have similar profit risk ratios. So if you take the profitability of some market times the risk you get for that profit, it's almost universal. And anytime there is a market that gets way out of line, like, oh, you can go into this business and it's got 3 times the profit for half the risk, everyone's going to pour into that market until it gets down into about the same rate of return. So it doesn't matter where you go in the economy, it's always moving everybody toward the same rate of return, which is why I use the number 5% in my analysis, because I figure, well, you're doing really good to find a 5% return in this economy, particularly relatively low risk 5% return. And below that rate of return, most miners would probably take their capital and go do something else where they could get 5% or more. Above that rate of return, and more competition is going to enter the market until it gets down to that. So basically, Bitcoin mining profitability is going to approach the market price of the rate of return and risk associated with it. And that's going to define the security. What that means is if you can, all the other 95% of that proof of work is not adding to their security, because it's only the profit margin that's actually motivating people. If you know, Walmart, they do hundreds of billions in revenue, but they've got only a couple percent margin. It's the couple percent margin that generates all their profit and sets the value of Walmart. Their revenue is just the waste. It's the waste heat that was required in order to earn the profit. Now, a small percent on a large amount of revenue is still a lot of money. But if you're talking about security and cost to attack the network, it's all about the profitability. So the other aspect of that article was that we don't have to worry about our witnesses colluding, because to the extent that our witnesses are profitable and they've got high margins, it costs a lot to buy them out. They're not going to sell out to someone if it's going to compromise their future income stream. The cost to buy them out is proportional to the income they're receiving for being honest, right? So everyone who suggests, well, we should lower witness pay from $300 a month to $200 a month or whatnot, that's the moral equivalent of saying that we should lower the margins that Bitcoin miners are earning. It means it's easier to bribe our witnesses, or our witnesses go to alternative means to make profit, whether that is selling priority in the order market matching, or filtering transactions, or whatever. Someone who wants to buy out the witnesses or attack the network, the more profit there is, the more competition there's going to be for the positions, the more incentive there's going to be for people to find flaws and prove that witnesses aren't worthy. The more public you're going to have to be with your identity, because the more validation you're going to have to be. So in a certain sense, our security is proportional to our witness pay. And whereas ultimately going with that is, if you took the witness pay in terms of BitShares, how many BTS, today it might be $300 a month. But if you scaled BitShares up to the size of Bitcoin, it would be something like $70,000 a month is how much we would be paying the witnesses if we just kept their pay the same as it is in terms of BitShares. And at $70,000 a month, that's more profit for the witnesses than the mining pool operators are earning. And yet it's a fraction of the dilution that Bitcoin is paying. So in terms of economic incentive to defect, it's very expensive to get the witnesses to defect. It's as expensive as it would be to get a Bitcoin mining pool operator to defect. In fact, more expensive. And we'd have more of them. You know, Bitcoin might have 6 mining pools earning that amount, but our witnesses combined would be earning more. So profit margins you're basically buying loyalty. You're buying, and if you try to cheap on it, then it's going to be cheaper to buy defection. And I guess that's the whole point of that article, was for our community to understand, and for the Bitcoin community to understand, the cost of buying defection, and that we can actually make it more expensive to buy defection on our network than it is to buy defection on the Bitcoin network. And that's by looking at profit margins and not revenue.
So it essentially comes down to what you would say is human behavior. But I mean, what about like a state actor? You know, like that's what I would see as the big concern, because some of them, you know, might not like blockchain technology, right? So do you foresee like maybe just I'm just going to throw this out there like Brindle Swan was talking about Schminfo Wars. Do you foresee things like intelligence agencies coming out and having operatives that try to become witnesses, and all like they try to act like they're part of the community, infiltrate like they do generally with all these different movements throughout history? I mean, that might not be something where they worry about the profit aspect of it, right?
You always have that potential. They could go into the business of being a mining pool or they could enter any business and try to monetize it for its control rather than for its direct profit. And that's true of all areas of the economy. So the main thing is that our network has the ability to adapt and respond. The barrier to entry of creating alternative networks or of voting someone out, and the fact that you can detect it. Anyone who comes into power and then tries to filter transactions to prevent voting, that'd be like a president getting elected and trying to call off elections, right? It'd be immediately recognized as illegitimate. So what do they have to do instead? They have to keep people voting, allow people to think that there is still an election, even though there isn't. Fortunately, with blockchain technology, it's almost impossible to corrupt the election process. The stakeholders in the system, the votes are transparent. Everyone can audit it. It's very obvious if transactions aren't being included. So it's very difficult to corrupt that process, which means that in some extent, democracy can work in the event that someone comes in and tries to call off an election. Whereas you'd never know with the current political system if democracy is still in play or if it's being circumvented. You just don't know.
I don't know about you guys, but there's certain moments when I get goosebumps. And that's kind of, this was kind of an aha moment. So I actually appreciate it. That was kind of a question that's been on my mind quite a bit, but you make some very valid points that I hadn't thought of. Well, we are sitting at 1 hour and 8 minutes, and I am certain that we could go over further. Does anybody feel like there's something that's pressing that needs to be covered? And this, of course, includes you, Bytemaster. Warnio is asking about the Identibit snapshot.
Yes,
do you know anything about it?
The Identibit snapshot will not occur until the exact rules for determining the random snapshot date are defined. So it could have occurred already, or it could occur in the future, but we haven't established the rules by which the date will be picked. So if you recall earlier, we discussed having basically a random number drawn by the blockchain determine the date upon which the snapshot will be made into effect, and thereby remove the ability of individuals to game the snapshot release date and minimize the impact on you don't get the transient on the BitShares price, and therefore it will have less impact on the bit assets in the system. So I can say that we have not determined the algorithm and published the algorithm for determining what the date will be, but I can say that it is possible that it already happened according to an algorithm that will be judged fair in the future. I don't know what the snapshot is. So
that's cool.
That's there.
So it could be potentially any time from the day that he announced Identibits. Potentially.
Yeah, you broke up there, but yeah. All right, I've got to get going. We've got a lot of work to do between now and Tuesday. So thank you everyone for coming out.
Master, could I get 2 minutes for just one more question? I've screwed FavDiso over on this a couple times unintentionally. What's the status of the referral system? Has anything changed with respect to that?
The referral system on the network is operational and good to go. The affiliate system, we're tracking a lot of that stuff, but it has not been fully tested. It'll be something that we will be rolling out after we get through the upgrade.
Thank you, good sir. And thank you, everybody, for attending, as always.